While I was deployed in Kandahar, my wife drained our accounts, moved her new boyfriend into my house, and filed for divorce by email. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just said understood, and by the time she realized what I'd left behind, it was already too late. I was 4 months into my deployment in Kandahar when the email came in. The subject line was short, cold. "Let's be adults about this." That's how it started. No greeting, no warning, just 3 clipped sentences. She'd filed for divorce, she'd emptied the joint account, and she'd moved Jeremy into our home in Spokane. I stared at it for a long time, reading the words over and over, as if repetition would unlock a different meaning. But the meaning was clear. She was done. There was no fight, no explanation, no "we need to talk." Just a digital knife in the chest, sent from the comfort of the house I bought, the bed I built, the life I funded. I closed the laptop, slid it under my bunk, and went to the showers. The water was cold. Always was. I didn't flinch, didn't think, just let it run over me like rain hitting a stone. I got dressed in silence, strapped my boots, checked my gear. No one said a word. You learn not to poke at silence out here. It's often the only thing holding a man together. Wilson, my bunkmate, gave me a glance when I came back from patrol. Didn't say anything until lights out. "You good, man?" he asked from the top bunk, not looking up from his book. "Yeah," I said. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded and turned the page. That was it. That's how military guys handle pain. No hand-holding, no drama, just quiet understanding. The truth is, I wasn't surprised. 6 months before I deployed, something had shifted. Subtle things. Becky stopped asking about my day. Started going to the gym 3 times a week, but came back without a sweat. Started working late at the dental office, even though it was a 9 to 5 place. New friends I never met. New passwords on her phone. I didn't press. I didn't pry. That's not who I am. But I'm not blind either. I made small moves before I left. Quiet ones. Locked important documents in a storage unit across town. Opened a second bank account. Started diverting a piece of my pay without telling her. Not enough to notice, just enough to breathe if it ever came to this. I packed light when I deployed, but my gut told me I was leaving more than a house behind. That night, back in the dim blue glow of the barracks, I opened her email again. Read it, one last time. Then I hit reply. Typed a single word. Understood. No question mark. No exclamation, just a period. Then I shut the lid. Lay back on my bunk. Closed my eyes. Somewhere in Spokane, Jeremy was probably drinking from my favorite coffee mug. Becky was probably laughing in the kitchen I built. But I didn't feel rage. Not yet. I felt distance. Like I was watching my life through a pane of glass and someone else was living it. I didn't shout. Didn't accuse. Didn't scroll through her messages at night or track her location like some jealous teenager. That's never been me. My dad used to say, "If you have to chase the truth, it's already running." I listened to my gut instead. It didn't scream, but it spoke, low and steady, like the rumble of incoming weather. So I listened, and I acted, quietly. It started with a key. I had a copy made of the house key and stored it in my lockbox at the base. She didn't know that. Then the documents. Birth certificate, marriage license, VA loan papers, the deed to the house, all placed in a private storage unit across town. My name was the only one on that deed. We'd used my VA benefits to get the loan. I added her later, to the title, because that's what husbands do. At the time it felt like love. Now it felt like leverage. My grandfather's watch, my mum's silver, a few other keepsakes. I moved them too. I didn't want to come home and find my memories sold off in a garage sale. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being prepared. I opened a second checking account at a credit union I'd never used before. Had a portion of my military pay rerouted there. Nothing major, just enough to have options. She never noticed, never asked. She was too busy with her girls' nights and her new gym routine. I'd come home from work some nights and she'd be out already, face lit by the glow of a text from someone she never talked about. I remember the last dinner we had together before I deployed. She made chicken Alfredo. The sauce was store-bought. She used to make it from scratch. We barely spoke. She didn't ask about my flight, didn't ask about my schedule, just scrolled her phone and said, "Be safe," like I was heading to Costco, not a war zone. I kissed her on the forehead at the airport. She smelled like a new perfume I didn't recognize. Her hug was soft, but hollow. There was no squeeze, no second glance when I turned away. Just a flat, distant bye. Still, I didn't let myself believe it fully. I told myself maybe she was just tired, overwhelmed, bored maybe, that I was imagining the worst. But my gut didn't lie. It never had, and it told me to be ready. So I set traps, legal, financial, quiet ones. I kept my passwords to myself. I left no digital breadcrumbs. I didn't confide in friends. I didn't rant to my unit. I just watched and waited. Because I've seen what happens when a man walks into battle unprepared. And this was becoming a different kind of war. The airport was quieter than usual that morning. No long security lines, no frantic parents chasing toddlers, just the low murmur of announcements and the occasional scraping of suitcase wheels on tile. Becky stood beside me at the gate, arms folded loosely, like we were waiting for a bus. She wasn't crying. She hadn't said much since we left the house, just small talk about the weather, something on the radio, and a reminder to take my vitamins. She smiled when she said that. A small, clipped smile, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. I was in uniform, boots polished, duffel slung over one shoulder. She barely looked at it. Didn't reach for my hand. I tried to fill the silence with something, asked about the dog, about the neighbor's kid, who always mowed our lawn. She gave short answers, no questions in return, just a glance at the clock and another fake smile. They called my boarding group over the loudspeaker. I stood up, adjusted my bag, looked at her one more time. Her eyes were dry, her arms were still crossed. I stepped forward and hugged her. She hugged me back, but it was the kind of hug you give to someone you barely know. Polite, brief, just enough to check the box. Her chin rested against my shoulder for half a second, then pulled away. "Stay safe, okay?" she said, tone flat. Like I was heading to a meeting, not to Kandahar. I nodded, didn't trust myself to say much, just turned, walked to the gate, and handed over my boarding pass. I didn't look back. Couldn't. I knew what I'd see. Her already walking toward the exit, phone in hand, texting someone else. Probably Jeremy. Probably the same man who'd end up drinking from my coffee mug, walking my dog, sleeping in my bed. Somewhere over the Atlantic, while most of the plane dozed in stiff seats, I stared out the window into black nothingness. I thought about that hug, how empty it was, how it wasn't really a goodbye, not between two people who mattered to each other. It felt like a formality, like she'd already said her real goodbye weeks ago to someone else, and I'd just missed the memo. I should have known then. Maybe I did. Maybe that's why I didn't cry, why I didn't get angry. I just stared out the window, listening to the low hum of the engines and the muffled snoring behind me, and felt this cold certainty settle into my chest. The kind you feel when the damage is already done and all that's left is to walk through the wreckage and see what can still be salvaged. Becky was no longer waiting on the other side of this deployment. She'd already left. I just hadn't arrived at the goodbye yet. It was 2 weeks after the email when I got the alert. I was sitting in the mess hall halfway through some mystery meat and canned corn when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Low battery, one new notification, bank app. I opened it without thinking, like I'd done a dozen times before, just to check balances, maybe see if my pay had posted early. What I saw made my stomach hollow out. Joint checking. $22. I stared at the screen, blinked, looked again. Maybe it was a glitch, a delay, a maintenance issue. I switched over to savings. The number hit even harder, $47,000. Gone. Just gone. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just set my fork down, slowly, like sudden motion might break something more. I scrolled through the transaction history. It wasn't one big hit. It was surgical, clean. Small withdrawals at first, over weeks. Then bigger ones. The last one, $88,500, was transferred 3 days ago to an account I didn't recognize. Not hers, not ours. Something new, something private. Murphy sat down across from me with his usual tray of chili and cornbread, looked up and caught the expression on my face. Bad news. I clicked my phone screen off and slipped it into my pocket. Just some account stuff. He shrugged and started eating. That was the thing about being deployed. Everyone had something going on, and no one really wanted to know the details unless you asked for help. I didn't ask. I wasn't ready. Later that night, I walked to the phone center, sat in a booth with peeling paint and a cheap plastic chair, called the bank, explained who I was, what I was seeing. The woman on the other end was polite, too polite. That kind of robotic cheer they use when they're about to tell you something awful but don't want it to sound personal. She confirmed the transfers, said they were authorized from the online portal, all login activity traced back to our home IP address in Spokane. She even asked if I wanted to review the usernames that had been used. I didn't need to. I already knew. When I hung up, I sat in the hallway outside the booth for a long time, just listening. Guys walking by, laughing, calling their kids, talking to their wives. Bits of normal life echoing down the concrete hallways like ghosts. Mine felt like it had been emptied, repackaged, and mailed to someone else. Back in the barracks, Wilson looked up from his cot. You look like hell. I didn't argue. I laid down, closed my eyes, and stared at the dark ceiling. She hadn't just left. She'd cashed out our life, and she'd done it so casually, like it was groceries or gas. That was when I knew. This wasn't just over, it was war. Sleep didn't come that night, not even close. I laid there, still in uniform, staring at the metal frame above me, while Wilson snored like a buzzsaw. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers, $88,500, $47,000, $22.37. I saw her name on that email, saw the subject line like it had been branded into the inside of my skull. I saw him too. Jeremy, a name I hadn't even heard until 2 weeks ago, now lodged like shrapnel in my brain. At 04:30, I gave up on sleep, pulled out my laptop, connected to the satellite Wi-Fi, spotty as hell, but just enough. I logged into our home security system, something she'd probably forgotten I could still access. I'd installed the cameras myself during my last leave, front door, back porch, living room, kitchen, everything uploaded to cloud storage. I told her it was for peace of mind when I was deployed. She said it made her feel watched. Apparently, not enough. The stream took a moment to load, and when it did, I froze. There it was. My living room, the couch I picked out, the coffee table I built, and him, Jeremy, sitting there barefoot, scrolling through his phone, drinking from my mug, my Seahawk mug, the one Becky got me after my first tour, the one I used every Sunday while we watched the games. Only now it was pressed to someone else's mouth. He stood up, stretched, then walked into the kitchen. Becky followed, laughing, barefoot, wearing one of my old shirts like it was hers. They danced around each other like they'd done it 1,000 times before. She leaned into him, kissed his neck, opened the fridge I paid for. I paused the feed, closed the laptop, just sat there with my hands pressed tight against my face. I didn't feel heat in my chest. Didn't feel rage like in the movies. I felt cold, the kind of cold that wraps around your ribs and settles in behind your eyes. I could have screamed, could have punched the wall. Instead, I pulled out my notebook and made a list. Call James, old buddy turned military lawyer. Check VA loan paperwork. Pull marriage license from storage. Review pension account security. Confirm any recent changes to the deed. That wasn't anger. That was strategy. That was focus. I wasn't going to show up and beg. I wasn't going to send a long, emotional email. I'd been overseas long enough to know you don't walk into a minefield when you've got a drone in the sky. She could have the mug. She could have the sweatshirt. She could play house with her new man for now, because what she didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that the house she was laughing in, it was still mine. The next morning, just before dawn, I called James. We'd served together in Ramadi, same unit. He was the kind of guy who always had an extra pair of socks, always knew where the enemy was, always read the fine print. After his discharge, he used his GI Bill to go to law school. Now he handled military legal affairs out of a small office in Tacoma. We hadn't talked in years, but some people, you don't need to warm up with small talk. You just call and they answer. Secure line, he said as soon as he picked up. Talk. I laid it all out in 5 minutes. The divorce, the bank withdrawals, the guy in my house, the security footage, and most of all, the feeling. That itch behind the ribs that tells you the story's not finished yet. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause. You still have the house deed. Stored it before I left, in my name. Good. VA loan, all mine. Then you've got leverage. What do you want? That was the first time someone had asked me that. Not, how are you? Not, are you okay? Just the right question. I want to make sure she can't sell the house. I want to make sure that if she forged anything, it sticks. And I want to do this without drama. James chuckled. Drama's coming either way. But yeah, we can make it quiet. Send me copies of everything. Sign nothing without me. And listen, check your house paperwork. She can't touch VA-backed property without your signature. If she tried, we might have something. I hung up. My hands were steady, my mind sharper than it had been in weeks. That night, I requested digital access to the house documents. Took a few tries through the clunky government portal, but eventually I got what I needed. The refinance paperwork. It had my name on it, my signature. Or something trying to be my signature. I zoomed in. The strokes were wrong. My middle initial wasn't even included. Whoever signed it knew how I wrote my name. They'd seen it 100 times on birthday cards, checks, lease agreements. But they didn't know the details. They didn't know the way I curled the R or how the T never connected. It wasn't me. I stared at the screen, felt something settle in my chest. Becky had forged my signature. That was fraud, on a federal loan. And if Jeremy had anything to do with it, if his name was on those papers, then he wasn't just living in my house. He was walking straight into a federal charge. I sent everything to James, every document, every screenshot, every time-stamped frame of that security footage. He replied within the hour, "This just turned criminal, let's move." And in that moment, I stopped being the guy who'd been left. I became the guy building the trap. 2 days later, I was back on US soil. No parade, no surprise welcome, no calls to Becky. I checked into a motel on the edge of Spokane under a different name. James met me there with a manila folder thicker than I expected. He slid it across the table like we were back in the field, handing off intel. "Everything we talked about," he said, "and then some." I opened it. Inside were copies of the loan documents, bank statements, and something new. A refinance application pulled from county records. It was dated 3 months ago. The signature on it was mine, except it wasn't. And next to it, in print too clean to be accidental, was the name Jeremy Ryan, listed as a co-applicant. "She used the equity in the house," James said, "pulled out 330 grand. I just stared at the page. "My signature's required for that," I said finally. "It's a VA loan, sole borrower." James nodded. "Exactly. This is fraud. She forged it." And Jeremy co-signed. I ran his name, by the way, 2 DUIs, 1 fraud charge back in 2019. Nothing major, but enough to raise flags. "You ready for the kicker?" He reached into his bag and pulled out another paper, a property inquiry form. "She's getting ready to sell." My throat went dry. Sell the house? Not officially listed yet, but I pulled bank transfer data from the refinance account. Several payments, small, irregular, to someone named Daniel Spencer. I did some digging. He's a real estate agent, specializes in fast, off-market sales, cash deals, nothing fancy, low-risk buyers. Guess who he's worked with before? I didn't have to ask. Jeremy Ryan, James said. They've done at least 3 deals together, all following the same pattern: divorced or divorcing woman, VA loan or military tie, husband out of the picture, house gets sold below market value to a trusted buyer, one of Spencer's guys, and Jeremy gets a cut. My hands were flat on the table, my jaw locked tight. So this wasn't just about Becky leaving me. James shook his head. This might be a play they've run before. You're not the first, but you might be the one that breaks it. I stared out the motel window at a parking lot filled with cracked pavement and faded lines. The house wasn't just mine in name, it was mine in sweat, in every shingle I'd replaced, in every weekend spent on the yard. And they were trying to flip it like it was some investment property, like it didn't mean anything. I turned back to James. I want them stopped, both of them. I want to blow this wide open. James didn't hesitate. Then we bait the trap. Let them list it. Let them move. And we catch them mid-sail, red-handed. I nodded slowly. She thought it was over when she hit send. But I was only getting started. I used to think this was just about me. About one broken marriage, one woman who got tired of waiting, and one guy dumb enough to believe loyalty still counted for something. But the deeper James and I dug, the more the pieces started shifting into place, forming something darker than betrayal. Something practiced. James called the next morning. I was sitting in the motel parking lot, drinking gas station coffee, watching the sunrise bleed across the sky like a bruise. I found 3 more, he said without any build-up. All military, all deployed when it happened. He laid them out for me like case files. One guy in El Paso, deployed to Syria. Came back to find his house sold for cash, ex-wife already remarried. Another in Fayetteville. Same story, same real estate agent. The third, a Marine out of Camp Pendleton. His house went up for sale 2 months after he deployed, bought by an LLC tied to a shell company. Guess who the agent was? Daniel Spencer. And in 2 of the cases, Jeremy Ryan's name showed up. Once as a contractor, once as a buyer's rep. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a system, a setup, a quiet scheme that counted on deployed men not being able to act fast enough, not being able to protect what was theirs until it was already gone. They weren't just breaking hearts. They were stealing lives, piece by piece, signature by forged signature. James sent me screenshots, court filings, property transfers, public records that had been buried under boring legal language, but all told the same story. Military man leaves. Relationship falters. House is refinanced, flipped and gone before he even gets boots back on US soil. The women didn't always seem to know what was happening. Sometimes they were just caught in the current. Sometimes they were helping steer the ship. I sat with that for a long time. Thought about how many guys never fought it. How many came back and just let it go. Too tired, too ashamed, too broken. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something colder, focused, not just on Becky and Jeremy, but on every predator like them, hiding behind paperwork and fake smiles. That afternoon, James made some calls. By evening, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division had returned one of them. They were already looking into Spencer for something unrelated. Shady veteran property loans in another state. Now they had something bigger. You might be the thread that unravels the whole thing, James said. They want a meeting, soon. I closed my eyes and nodded to myself. What started as personal had just become federal, and I was done playing defense. The plan wasn't complicated. That's what made it dangerous. James and I spent 2 days mapping it out. Every move, every contingency. No emotion, no ego. Just precision. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted proof. Not a shouting match in the driveway. A clean, recorded confession that would leave no room for doubt. I already had the security cameras installed. What Becky and Jeremy didn't know was that they hadn't just inherited a house. They'd inherited a surveillance system wired straight to my cloud. It started with a simple trigger. Becky texted me again, this time asking to meet. Said she wanted to clear the air, that we were adults and could handle things privately. James shook his head when I showed him the message. She's nervous, he said. She knows something's coming. Good, I told him. Let her think I'm on my way. The next morning, I parked down the street from the house and waited. At 9:45, Becky drove off in her silver sedan, heading across town, probably to the meeting I had no intention of showing up to. At 10:02, another car pulled into the driveway, clean, new, a real estate logo printed across the door. Daniel Spencer. Jeremy came out to meet him. I watched from the car. No rush, no panic. Just two guys, shaking hands like it was any other Wednesday. They walked into my house, the one I'd painted, furnished, poured years of paychecks into. I didn't follow, didn't need to. I had eyes and ears on every inch of that place. I pulled up the live feed on my phone. The camera in the living room caught everything. Spencer with a clipboard, Jeremy gesturing to the walls. "Kitchen's all new," he said proudly, like he'd ever lifted a tool in his life. "He did all this last year, right before the deployment. Becky wants to list at 470. 470's ambitious, Spencer said. I've got a cash buyer lined up at 420. We list at 470, settle for 420, everyone's happy. What about the husband?" Spencer shrugged. "Military types make noise but don't follow through. They're overseas, tied up in red tape. Trust me, we've done this before." That was it, right there. The moment it shifted from suspicion to confession. Spencer wasn't just helping with a shady listing. He admitted to a pattern, a method, a scheme. Jeremy nodded. "He's already back on US soil. Becky says he's snooping." Spencer waved it off. "Then close fast. Get her to push it through. If he fights it, we settle. Worst case, she takes a payout and walks." James was recording the entire stream from the passenger seat next to me. No emotion, no commentary, just quiet satisfaction. "Got it," he said. "That's enough." I forwarded the footage to Agent Patel with one line of text. "Happening now." 32 minutes later, 3 black SUVs turned the corner and surrounded my house. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't need to. The cameras kept rolling as Spencer and Jeremy were led out in handcuffs. And the plan, the one they'd run on who knows how many others, finally ran into someone who'd set a better one. It was surreal, watching it all unfold from the same street I used to drive down after long shifts, wondering if Becky had started dinner or if she was out with friends again. Now I sat in a borrowed sedan with tinted windows, watching a different kind of homecoming. FBI agents in dark jackets moved with practiced calm, one at the front door, 2 at the back, one already holding Spencer against the hood of his car. Jeremy was in cuffs before he even had time to put on his shoes. He looked confused, not scared, confused, like the world had suddenly stopped making sense to him. I watched through the windshield as they brought him out, the same guy I'd seen on my security feed using my coffee mug and walking my dog. Now he was barefoot on the driveway, squinting into the morning sun, trying to understand why his plan wasn't working. Then I saw her. Becky's car pulled up fast, tires crunching against gravel. She stepped out slowly, the way people do when their brain is scrambling to catch up to reality. She was dressed for the meeting she thought we were having. Nice blouse, sunglasses, hair curled. She spotted the agents, the handcuffs, the documents being pulled from the house, and her posture changed. That confident, breezy indifference I knew so well vanished. Her arms fell to her sides. Her mouth hung slightly open. She didn't move toward the house. She didn't speak to the agents. She just stood there, frozen. I watched from half a block away, hidden in plain sight. Not with satisfaction, not with triumph, just quiet. Like the silence after a storm when you walk outside and realize the world is still standing, but it's not the same world you left. My phone rang. Agent Patel. "We've got them," she said. "Wire fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft under false pretenses." "You were right. They were preparing to sell your home with forged documents, and they admitted, on tape, to a pattern involving other military families." "What about Becky?" There was a pause. "She just arrived on the scene. She looks stunned. We're questioning her now, still determining her level of involvement." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Let me know when you know." "She asked if we'd heard from you," Patel added. "Said she's trying to get in touch." I looked at the screen. Another message from Becky had just come in. "Nathan, what's happening? Please call me. This isn't what it looks like." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was standing in front of the life she thought she'd rewritten with someone else's pen, and watching it crumble in real time. Not because I confronted her, not because I yelled or begged or threatened, but because she forgot the one thing I never do. I don't start fights, I finish them. The courtroom smelled like old wood and cheap carpet. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale, clinical glow. I sat at the back, not in uniform, not trying to make a statement, just watching, just present. Becky sat on the other side, a row in front of me, her hair pulled back, clothes simple, no makeup. She didn't turn around. I don't think she could. Jeremy wasn't there. He'd already taken the plea deal, 8 years for fraud, conspiracy, identity theft. Spencer got 12. The system worked for once. James leaned in. "They're offering a settlement, full restitution of the refinance. Becky signs over her claim to the house, gives up any part of your pension, and provides a written confession for the forgery. In exchange, you agree not to press charges." I looked at her then. Just a little. The same woman who'd once danced barefoot in our kitchen, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movies. Now a stranger, smaller somehow. Like all the fire and swagger had been burned down to just ash and regret. "They say she didn't know about the scheme," James added. "Claim she thought Jeremy was helping her protect herself. That he said you were hiding money, that you'd planned to leave her first." I didn't say anything. I thought about my parents, about my grandfather's watch, my mother's silver, about the nights I spent in Kandahar wondering if I'd ever see home again, and what home even meant now. I thought about how much of myself I'd given to a life that someone else had casually walked into and tried to sell off like it was nothing. And then I thought about the letter I got last week. A woman in Fort Worth, Navy wife, same setup, same agent, same boyfriend pattern. "Because of you," she wrote, "we still have our home." Her words were taped to the inside of my locker now. I read them more than I admitted. "What do you want to do?" James asked. I exhaled slowly. Thought about revenge, about dragging her name through every paper in the county, about watching her leave court in handcuffs like Jeremy. I had every right, but all I felt was done. I didn't want her locked up. I didn't want more court dates. I just wanted distance, peace, something clean. "Tell them I'll accept the settlement," I said. She signs everything, walks away with nothing. No more calls, no more texts, no more trying to explain. James nodded. She won't see it coming. She expected a war. She got one, I said. Just not the kind she thought. When court adjourned, Becky finally turned around. Just a flick of her eyes. No tears, no smile. Just the look of someone who finally understood what she'd lost, and that it had nothing to do with money. She mouthed something. Maybe sorry, maybe thank you. I couldn't tell, but I didn't need to, because I wasn't there to hurt her. I was there to end it. The letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address, postmarked from Texas. I almost didn't open it. I'd just finished stacking firewood behind the cabin, Scout snoring on the porch, the last of the evening sun warming the pine trees. It had been months since I left Spokane, since the court date, since I sold the house I'd once called home. I didn't miss it, not the memories carved into its walls, not the rooms where silence used to feel like distance. I bought a small cabin outside of Missoula, 2 bedrooms, 10 acres of land, a creek running through the back. No neighbors for miles. Some days I wouldn't see another human being until I drove into town for groceries. That suited me just fine. I opened the envelope with a pocket knife, unfolded the lined paper. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. "You don't know me, but I know what you did." That's how it started. She was the wife of a Navy corpsman. Said she found out her husband's name was on a list. Homes being targeted by the same crew Jeremy and Spencer worked with. She said the FBI came before the sale could go through. Froze the process, protected their house. She'd seen my name in the paperwork, my testimony, my case. They told me your story was the one that broke it open, that you didn't stop when it got personal, that you fought back, that you didn't just protect your home, you protected ours too. I sat down on the porch steps, the wind rustling through the pines, Scout shifting beside me with a sleepy grunt. You saved our life, she wrote. Thank you. I hope you're okay. I hope you found peace. It wasn't long, just a page, but it said everything. I read it twice, folded it up again, and pinned it to the small corkboard I kept above my workbench inside. It hung there between a picture of my parents, a schedule from the local farmer's market, and a hand-scrawled quote from my old CO. Do your job, then keep doing it. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. The work was done. Some days the silence out here gets heavy, but I've learned that silence isn't the same as loneliness. Out here, it's just space, room to breathe, to heal, to remember that not all losses have to break you, and not all endings are tragedies. I still wake early, still keep my gear tidy, still run drills with Scout in the woods just to stay sharp. Old habits die hard, but there's no war left in me, not anymore. Just a quiet life I built from the pieces they couldn't take. One letter on the wall, one story that mattered, and the kind of peace you don't get from revenge, only from knowing you did what was right, even when no one expected you to, even her.